listening to The Observing Eye. Pirate radio for the mind. Coming at you fresh from the computer hell cabin.
Hello, you beautiful lot. It is Friday, the 24th of March, and we are here again for episode 11 of The Observing Eye. What the fuck happened to last week, David? Yeah, sorry. I want to talk about that a little bit, actually. I think there's some stuff to be said around it. But first, let's begin. Let's have our usual check-in. How are we all doing? Let's take a moment to think about the positive stuff that's been going on the past 2 weeks. It's been 2 weeks. And let's take a moment to think about stuff that's not been so great. So last week then, where was I last week? Where's your consistency? Firstly, apologies. Yes, it has been a week lapse. Last week I was down in the mud. I was having a challenging week last week. I was being consumed by a deep sense of the overwhelm. I had realized that I was spending too much time and emphasis on work and output and execution rather than spending time on my well-being. And this is a thing, isn't it? This is something I preach to everybody. Self-compassion, look after yourselves, yet the preacher doth not follow his book. It happens. I'm a human being, you know. I know this stuff. I know what I should be doing. But sometimes we get lost in the miasma, don't we? Lost in the fog, and things take on a certain sense of importance when maybe they shouldn't necessarily have the weight that we give them. Fundamentally, it was good because it gave me some time to reflect. Being down in the mud is a term that I use for those times when we are not feeling at our peak. So that's where I was last week. That's what I was missing. I spent some time self-reflecting, and essentially a lot of the things that I was planning on doing, like my content writing, has taken a bit of a slide. The podcast took a dip last week. I was procrastinating hard because I was in conflict between myself wanting to get the work done and myself wanting to take some time out and actually do some things that were not stuck at a desk. So that's what happened last week. And yeah, I thought it was important to share that. This is a safe space, and how can I expect all of you to be authentic and think about what's going on with you if I'm not authentic and share the things that are going on with me? So that's that. It gave me some inspiration, however, for the topic of conversation for this week's podcast, which is execution and strategy. Last week was a prime example of me being caught up way too much in the idea of execution without considering or without taking into account, taking time for strategic thinking. Now, we live in a culture, don't we, particularly with work and stuff, where we are very focused on productivity and execution. So long as we are seen to be busy, then we are busy. But I think that can lead us to running in circles. I don't think that we necessarily spend the time thinking about the process that happens before the execution. You know, the plan that we execute. We just do. We must achieve, we must perform, we must produce. It's that idea, isn't it? Who's busier, the person who's sat at a desk writing thousands of words a day, or the person who is staring out of a window considering what's going on and what they're going to do? Both, I feel, well, there's obviously a big bias towards the person who is sitting there writing thousands of words a day or running around like a crazy person with a clipboard in their hand, because that's our perception, isn't it? You must be moving, you must be executing. To be busy, you must be seen to be doing. this idea that to take a moment to reflect and to think about the execution, about what the path is, that strategic aspect, we don't necessarily consider quite so much to be as important. When, if anything, I think it is deeply, deeply more important than the execution. Because as I found out last week, consistently executing without a strategic idea behind it leads us into a deep spiral of dismay and potential overload and overwhelm. I use the word overwhelm with the proper noun, the capital O there. It's all good now, though. We have these moments, don't we? So strategic thinking, then. We've got a lot of ideas, haven't we, as human beings? We're creative creatures, and a lot of the time I feel, and this may just be me, but I don't feel like it is, when we have these ideas, we're very keen, very eager to immediately begin executing them. And those ideas can be small things, or they can be grandiose projects. But either way, we don't necessarily spend the time scrutinizing and contemplating and considering the components that go into the thing that we're creating. And this can lead us to blindly run around in the execution phase, making mistakes, creating more work for ourselves, having to retrofit and retroactively fix things that come up later on because things haven't been considered. And if any of you out there have worked or do work in project management or delivery management or any of those kind of aspects, you will entirely understand this. There's the saying, isn't there? The failing to plan is preparing to fail, which I think is true entirely. And I think we need to take stock of that and apply it to our general living, the things that we do in life that we don't necessarily consider productive outlets. But there's so much that we do that is productive. So by applying this idea of strategic thinking to our general day-to-day business as usual stuff, I feel like we can relieve or release a lot of mental capacity that can be spent on better things and alleviate a lot of pressure and stress and disharmony within ourselves that comes about through blindly running into the dark and not taking stock of where the fuck we're going. I've been reading a book recently by the School of Life, which was founded by the philosopher Alain de Botton. If you've read any of his books, he's brilliant. I'd highly recommend them. There's a fabulous one called Essays in Love, which is one of my favorites. But so his School of Life created a book called How to Think More Effectively. And I've been reading this book on and off for about 2 weeks. It's a really, really interesting read, and I'd highly recommend that you pick up a copy of it from your local bookseller, obviously not from the Goliath Amazon or from School of Life directly. But in it, they talk a lot around this idea of execution. And it was, as serendipity would have it, when I was reading this book last week that I thought to myself, shit, I am blindly executing without considering where I'm going with this. So the book, I want to borrow a little bit from the book to sort of try and transfer some of the knowledge I've gained from it to you all, essentially. The first part that I found really interesting is where the book talks about how uncomfortable strategic thinking can feel. And what it means by this is that when we are not busy doing, we feel like we aren't doing. We forget that we need time. We need time and we need moments where we can just consider. And we also have to take into account that the mind is not very good at remaining pinpointedly focused on tasks for long periods of time. I say long periods like hours and hours on an end. It has a tendency to flit about like the butterfly mind, ethereal and dancing around on the wind, following thoughts that don't necessarily have any purpose when what we're trying to do is focus on something. So strategic thinking can be challenging because we are putting ourselves in a space where we aren't actively doing, we're not executing, so we may not feel like we're producing, and we're trying to keep the mind in a space where it's concentrating on a singular thing or, a small group of things in order to resolve an issue or to plan going forwards. One thing the book suggests, which I wholeheartedly agree with, and I have been lax on lately, I will wholeheartedly admit, is having a notebook, writing stuff down. There are many times when I am locked in my hubris thinking, I can remember all this, that's completely fine. We don't necessarily consider that a fully constructed idea can take us months to put together. And if we write stuff down as we go, we take it out of our head, we stop thinking that we are these indelibly memorable things, we have indelible memory, and recognize that we are going to forget shit. I can put a cup of coffee down and then 30 seconds later forget where the cup of coffee is. So why the hell I think I can remember complex ideas and thoughts months, down the line is ludicrous, really, when I consider it. So write stuff down. God, use that. You may write stuff down in November of last year that then begins to coalesce and finally forms today, tomorrow, next week. But you want to have that thread, that chain of thought there that enables you to create a strategy, that enables you to join the dots and to have some context into what you were thinking previously and how it's going to influence and benefit what you're trying to create now. I don't know about you, but a lot of seeds of ideas can be really weird, ethereal things that come up out of nowhere, and I will forget them instantly. But by having a reference point for these seeds, they can become something fantastic. So it's important to write shit down. So if you haven't got one, get a notebook, get a pen. I personally love Moleskines, but I'm not branded or I'm not branded. I'm not sponsored by them. I'm not tarnished with a hot iron. But I'd recommend anything like that. Write stuff down. That's your first point. The other thing that the book says that I think, and I'm going to end on this note, that I think is deeply, deeply important, is that we so often lack the confidence of our own ideas and our own thoughts. We feel that great ideas come from other people, come from outside. We feel that there are these geniuses that just conjure up these magical moments and thoughts and ideas, and we rely on them. We have no confidence in our own capacity to do it. But what's interesting is that the difference between us and the geniuses who we see that come up with the ideas is conviction. We need to have conviction in our own thoughts and our own creativity. And through having that conviction, we recognize that these things do not come from the external, they come from the internal. Authority is bullshit. We mustn't allow ourselves to be swayed by the ideas of doubt and then we're not good enough and, someone must have thought of this already, so why will we bother? We have to have faith in ourselves and to commit and to be unerred by what we are bombarded with in the external and all of the voices, both inside and outside, that come to us in the middle of the night and say, you're not good enough, this idea, what are you doing? This is a waste of time. Fuck all of them. We need to have that conviction. That is so, so important. And we need to reflect on what we're thinking and what we've come up with, which is why writing stuff down is so useful. Iterate, iterate, iterate. Consider what it is that we've done, how we've done it, question it, debug it, essentially, and try again, and keep considering and keep thinking, and all the while we're doing that, having that conviction, having that faith that, we can fucking well do this. I'm swearing a lot this one, aren't I? I'm getting impassioned and enamored by my words. So that's what I've got to say on strategy over execution. Have faith in yourself, have conviction, Write shit down. Give yourself space. Being busy isn't busy doing. It's okay to have those contemplative moments, because it's in those moments where the good shit comes out. You know, how many times do you hear of people coming up with mad ideas in the shower? Because the brain isn't actively engaged in a task of doing. It's in a space of like white noise where it can just think and flow and butterfly, you know, ebb around at its own whim. And it's those little moments we have to create for ourselves. The ones that are busy doing are not necessarily the ones creating good art. And on that note, I wish you a thought-filled, thoughtful, strategically oriented weekend that you write down about in your notebook that you've just ordered from the Bezos shop. Have a wonderful one, everybody. And I will catch you in the next episode. Much love.
You've been listening to The Observing Eye. Thanks for spending some time with me today. I hope that you found it useful. And if you're interested in any more of my writings or work around psychology and philosophy and general day-to-day living, please go and take a look at my Substack, which is theobservingeye.substack.com, and that's I as in the letter, not I as in the gelatinous organ through which you see. Take care, everybody. Much love, and I'll see you soon.